Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today are Louis D'Souza and Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Marie is going to try to join us shortly, hopefully. She'll be able to step in probably about 50 minutes or so if it works out right. But meantime, we're going to get started with Louis and our guest, Branden Coluccio. And Louis, he is a savage. He's self-admitted. He has acknowledged to the world that he is a savage of the white collar variety.
He sounds like my type of man.
I would say, yeah. So let's bring him on without further ado.
I love it.
Branden, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome. Let's rock and roll.
All right. So give us a little bit of a taste. Where does this inner white collar savage idea come from in the first place?
Yeah. So a little bit of a background of kind of what I've been through. I'll give you the quick version. Okay. So I'm an entrepreneurial guy, sort of like born and bred entrepreneur. My family members are all entrepreneurs, all different types of businesses. But I grew up in that environment, right? So very, very entrepreneurial. Always dreamed of building and selling big companies. Like from the time I was a child, that was my ambition in life. I was never the person to struggle with finding what they wanted to do. And so I went off and I went off to university and studied economics and tried to go the private equity investment banking path and ended up battling my way into private equity a few years after school, after doing some mergers and acquisitions, advisory work and management consulting, that type of thing. And finally battled my way in, and I realized wow, I think I screwed up, right? Like I thought that this was the path to building big companies was getting into private equity, but I realized I was on the wrong side of the check, right? Because I'm in my 20s and I'm cold calling companies, all the time to try to beg them, literally calling CEOs, please let me write you a check for $20 million to buy your company, please. And then they would just hang up on you, right? And that's generally how that goes. And so at one point or another, I realized that I wasn't quenching that thirst for entrepreneurship. And I was sort of falling into this more corporate finance world. And at one point, I was recruited by two executives from the healthcare space, substance abuse treatment, which is, something that each of us are touched by, I'm sure, in some way. I have a sibling who has struggled her whole life with substance abuse, mostly heroin, but polysubstance. And so it was sort of a moment for me where I was 26 years old when they came to me and they said, look, we'd be willing to give you a third of the company if you can help us raise some capital, which was something that I believed that I could do and had the relationships to do. And so we were sort of off and on our way. At 26 years old, I was finally becoming an entrepreneur, what I thought that I always wanted to be. And I think what I believed was my right path. And that for me was a moment, right? These gentlemen that invited me were, significantly older, probably 10, 12 years older than me, more experienced. So I looked up to them in many ways and was just, frankly, at 26, I was just psyched to be invited to the party, right? Wow, this is an amazing opportunity. So went off and did that, raised a bunch of capital. We built this company up over a period of, it grew very, very quickly, frankly. And by the end of, about 18 months, we had about almost 150 employees across a couple different divisions, 4 treatment locations, a corporate office, 125 sober living beds. I mean, this was a real business that we had stood up in a relatively short period of time. And we were getting approached by private equity to acquire the company. And so what ended up happening is eventually, a number of suitors came in, made offers, and one went through. And at the end of 2017, at the age of
At the age of.
I'm sorry.
Whoops.
I lost you there. We got.
Yep. We got you to the point of up the age of, and then it just went blank.
Yeah. So I had a phone call come in. So at the age of 29 years old, I ended up having an exit that was just under $67 million. And so I'm thinking I'm clever. I'm thinking, right, I've got this sort of business entrepreneurship thing figured out. And I go off and I continue to ramp up. And I co-founded a real estate development company called Captiva Capital Partners. We went off and we did probably about $40 million in real estate projects in the self-storage space. Went off and bought another company and was just about to acquire another business for about $3 million when I got a phone call one day. I'm at my real estate office. I get a phone call from my lawyer and he says, Branden, I have some terrible, awful news for you. And he says, you know, the active investigation that has been going on into this healthcare business that you were involved with has come to a head. And the government has decided that they are going to take an aggressive position. They want to make an example out of everybody involved. And unfortunately, that means they're throwing the book at pretty much everybody. And, you know, there's a list of about 10 or 11 names and yours is on it. And you're going to be indicted on like Monday or whatever it was. It was like a Tuesday of the week before. And in that moment, that phone call, my whole life shattered. You know, my entire identity of who I believed that I was, somebody who was law-abiding, trustworthy, compliant, out to try to do good for the world, suddenly that identity was completely reshaped. In addition to my positive reputation, my ego, like everything, it's just destroyed in that moment. And when I share that story with people, I was young, right? I was young and aggressive and hungry, and I had created, call it, if you add it all up, about $100 million of enterprise value by 31. And you start to drink your own Kool-Aid, I guess. And when something like that happens and you get your legs taken out from under you, you are really forced to look within. And this is where, to answer your question, this is where the white collar savage mentality was born. Because although the world saw outwardly, they saw success. I had the cars and the penthouse and all that stuff, right? That's all fine. But inwardly, I was self-medicating with alcohol. I was generally a pretty miserable person. I had no daily structure. I was not fit, right? I lacked all of the things that make a complete man. I only had the one component, which was, you know, we'll call it the business success. And so it was during this process that I created this persona. I had to create this persona because my back was against the wall. I was facing like significant adversity. And at one point after everything had crumbled, so if you think about it, I was off, you know, buying companies, building real estate, doing all this stuff, very, very fast-paced life. And then like the next day, I was sitting on my couch wondering what was going to happen with me. I was 31 years old, thinking my life was completely over and that I'd never do anything ever again of significance. And I sulked. I just crumbled. I completely cracked. And I sat around for about 3 weeks. And eventually I would watch Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. I found him screaming at people to be helpful in my weak state of mind. I don't know what it was, but anyway, at some point I said, like, what am I going to do am I going to do this for the rest of my life? Is this what I'm going to become? Am I going to crumble? Am I going to crack under this pressure? I had never really faced that level of adversity before in my life, right? And so it was difficult for me to respond. And at one point I woke up one day and I said, I can't do this. I was just married to the woman of my dreams. We were still married today. And I said, I can't do this to myself and I can't do this to her. Then no matter what happens, I'm going to find a way to take this terrible event that has occurred in my life, and I'm going to find a way to make this something that actually positively impacts people and lifts up everybody that I interact with. And I had no idea, like a true entrepreneur, I had no idea how the hell I was going to actually pull off that type of a mission. But it just kind of clicked in me, and I woke up and I just decided to make a change. And the first thing I did was I went for a run, right? You know, fitness, and you'll hear throughout the story, fitness saved my life. And so eventually, I'll save you all the legal boring details, but eventually I ended up accepting a plea agreement. And part of that was, my agreement was 37 months in federal prison and a $3.1 million fine, which for me, as somebody, I've never been in handcuffs, never been in any kind of trouble in my life, was a terrifying proposition. But we could not get the government to agree to anything less. And so I sat down with my wife and my family and I said, we have two choices, right? You know, both of them are terrible, terrible options. But if we go and we try to fight this thing, it could be significantly worse, right? So I end up taking the deal. I surrendered to federal prison in Connecticut in July of 2020. And because of some paperwork that my lawyer didn't file, I ended up going to a low security facility. So if most people don't know this, a lot of white collar people end up in minimum security facilities that do not have fences. You can actually get a work permit to kind of come and go, depending on if you qualify for all that. But I ended up in a low. A low has the double razor wire fence, the turrets on the corners, like it's a full-on prison. I've never been in handcuffs. I've never been in the back of a police car. I've never experienced anything like this. And so I walk into this facility expecting, horror. And because I walked in during COVID-19, I was placed into quarantine, mandatory quarantine. And what they did, I should say, was they placed people in solitary confinement where they would put you if you had shanked someone, for example. And so me, never having been incarcerated, never in jail, never nothing, they placed me in solitary confinement right out of the gate, right through processing, right into solitary confinement, 22 straight days. And in that place is when I figured out who I truly was. Because when you're put in that environment, when you've never been in something like, in a situation like that, you have two choices, right? That's like strength, just choose to try to be strong and get through it, or crack. And I went through a third round of solitary, and the guy in the cell next to me slit his wrists, right? And so that's the level of mental pressure that you're under in solitary. It's crazy. And what I did to save my own life was I would read and I would exercise, and that's all I would do. And so what ended up happening is I built this regimen, this process of lifting my mental frequency up by dropping to the floor, push-ups, walking back and forth in my little 9x5 cell, looking out the window as much as I could to try to get some sense of freedom. But it was a very, very eye-opening experience for me. And so I have taken the lessons that I learned in that place, that really dark place, and I've tried to apply them to my life throughout since then. And keeping in alignment with my mission, when I was eventually released into general population, I decided, look, I'm going to give back as much as I can. I believe I have value to add to this community. And so I hosted workshops and classes on entrepreneurship. I taught guys how to read. I volunteered at the GED department. I hosted classes on building a positive mindset and showing everybody in there that like each of you can be a high impact, wealthy individual who serves their family and serves others. And that was really the energy that I was trying to spread. And I continue to do that to this day. I teach, I'm an entrepreneurship coach for a group called Inmates to Entrepreneurs, which is a nonprofit organization that teaches individuals coming out of incarceration how to start businesses for less than $1,000. And then also through my coaching programs, I work with both high net worth individuals individually, as well as with businesses on helping them kind of grow and scale. So this is sort of the mentality that I have built. And the term white collar savage really is a combination of that. Grab yourself by the bootstraps and pick yourself up when you're down, as well as sort of I'll call it the business grooming that I've had in my life. And so I combine those two things, and that's what you get.
Wow. What a story. That's
Yeah.
That definitely captures your attention when you hear it. Interesting choice of words, white collar savage. I mean, you gave us an overview where what that means to you, but where did that come from?
So David Goggins is one of the people. So I'm a big fan of mentors, and so I've had some really positive mentors who've helped me, both people I've met and some that I have not met. And David Goggins is really been like a huge impact on my life. And his style is for some people, it's not for others, and I get that, but I resonate with it, right? I'm the type of man that I need somebody in my ear screaming at me. That's just me. I respond to that. Some people don't. And so he talks about like becoming a savage and what he had to go through in order to transform himself into the individual that he eventually became. And I had a very similar process, right? And so all I did was kind of combine some of the business acumen, if you will, and the business grooming that I have with that term. And the other thing is that I think the term white collar felon, I don't like the term, but of course I don't like the term because it's been my label. So I've essentially decided to create my own label, and that's how it all came about.
Okay. Yeah. I've heard many As you can imagine, over the years, I've done so many interviews here on the show,
Sure.
including with Louis and Anne-Marie, many people from many walks of life. The overarching theme is somebody who had some sort of success going on, then there's a horrible crash and burn followed by rising up the ashes, and then wanting to share what they learned with the world. And that sounds like it's very much what you're also doing as well. But you're kind of doing it a different kind, because you had there. I can count on one hand the number of people who've been on the show who've had severe crash and burn to the point where they're either near death or in prison or something along that line, and you fall in that category. That's kind of a different kind of crash and burn. I mean, I think you described it to us as you felt like you were shattered, which I thought was a pretty good adjective to describe it. But I'm not sure any of us who haven't lived it can really appreciate what that's like to come out the other side of that. I mean, you describe how somebody in a cell next door, I think it was, slit their wrists. And kind of illustrates just how crazy that environment is.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know how to even ask the question, but I'll try to ask it anyway. How do you survive that? How do you survive that kind of environment? Because clearly some people don't.
So when I was in that, and it's different, it goes through phases, right? So the first phase, when you're indicted or you're told you're going to be indicted, right? Especially for a professional, I built a decade-long, really strong reputation. At first, that was the only thing I could think about. The only thing I could think about was me. Poor me. What's going to happen to me, right? And then at some point, I transitioned to, like I tried to explain in my story, wait a minute, I need to get out of my head. I'm only thinking about me. What about my family? What about the people who care about me? What about the people who believe in me? Am I going to let those people down? Right? So I started to shift my mindset away from just myself and all the bad stuff that was happening to me, which I think is very easy for us to do. And this applies not just to a catastrophic situation. It applies to just general life, right? We're always obsessed with our own problems. And one of the things that really helped me through it was actually finding a bigger purpose and a bigger mission that was just outside of me. Of course, I found benefit in helping and serving other people. Yes, absolutely. But it was one of those things that for a moment, it distracted me from feeling sorry for myself essentially. And, when you're in the depths of those moments, like, for example, when I first went into solitary confinement, and I'll never forget that sound when that door shuts and it's like the strongest deadbolt you've ever heard. And there's no way you're getting out of there. And you don't know when you're going to get out. It literally becomes I just need to get through this moment now. And then you get through that moment, and then you get to the next moment. And what I would do is I would essentially just measure these moments in chapters of a book. And so fortunately there were like some books like strewn under the bed. And so I would just, whatever it was, I would just read it, and it's kind of your mental escape. And I would read a chapter and I would drop to the floor and I would do 50 push-ups or some burpees or whatever, just to get my energy level up and get my mindset up. And I just did that over and over and over and over and over again. And 3 weeks later, I walked out of there. I probably lost, and I'm not exaggerating, I walked into prison 186 pounds. I walked out 152. And so I probably lost about half that weight just in those 3 weeks, right? Like just the stress and the anxiety and the lack of calories, right? You're completely underfed. And so it just becomes, like I said, I just switched into this routine of read, exercise. And then I would also write every morning when I woke up. And so you break it down to like the fundamental components when you're in a situation like that, because that's all you have to focus on, right? You're locked in a room. What I tell people is like, go lock yourself in your bathroom for 3 weeks. That's pretty much what it's like.
Except that you can open the door.
Yeah, fair enough.
The situation you described sounds to me like I think I'd label it as survival mode. You're
exactly right.
You're trying to survive 1 second to the next.
That's a fact. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty intensive stuff.
It is.
As you're going through that experience, I don't know of a good adjective that even describes that, but as you're going through that experience, one of the first things that came to your mind was to write, which I equate to journaling. We talk about journaling a lot. What made you decide to do that?
Why or when did I decide to do that?
Well, both, I guess.
Yeah. So I had a mentor who helped me right before I went away. and his name is Michael, and he's one of the most positive, he's one of the happiest people I've ever met in my life. Michael did 26 straight years in prison on a 45-year to life sentence. And he has written numerous books. He's one of the country's leading advocates for prison reform. And he mentored me through the early stages of my journey and was very helpful. And he said one of the things that he found most beneficial was writing and then distributing your work to the people who it might help. And so what I did during my pre-trial process was I wrote a little book called Looking Forward, the Never Quit Mentality, and then a little self-directed course that went along with it. And I then licensed that to Michael and his group, and he put it into part of his curriculum that was then disseminated into jails and institutions around the country. And so even before I went away, I saw that even though it was just a tiny impact, I saw that the lessons that I was sharing as I was documenting my journey and going through struggle, I saw that there was actually a real world impact and that it was helping other people. And so I decided that I was going to continue to document my journey, both in writing and, more recently I've been putting a lot of content out there, right? So of course you can't do that while you're incarcerated. And so I did the best that I could. And one of the funny part of the story is that when you go into prison, they literally give you like a manual and it's like all the rules. And so I had no paper to write on, right? I don't have anything. I'm just in a cell. And so they give you a manual though. And then I found this little broken pencil under the bed. And so I like sharpened it on the side of the steel frame bed. And I would just write. I would write like in the margins, on the bottom of the page, on the backs of the pages. And I would just wake up and I would document my journey. I would write about what I saw. I would write about what I was thinking. I would write about my plans. I would write about all of the things that I felt grateful for in that moment. Again, just trying to focus on some of the positive things and then the impact that I wanted to have. And so, I found that process just to be almost like a release, if you will, of, just all the emotion, just let it kind of come out, sloppy on paper. And it was very, very helpful. And it's a process I still do. I write every single morning.
So you were describing a moment ago how you were very intent on getting that idea, that process into the hands of others, but it sounds also like it helped you specifically, personally.
100%. A lot of what I do, I mean, look, I do believe deeply in serving other people, but I get great enjoyment and I get a sense of validation and satisfaction from trying to improve the lives of other people. So it's both ways. Right. But absolutely. My writing every morning, I wake up at 4:30. I will either read some quotes. I'll study a little bit of philosophy and just kind of try to get my mind into a certain mental state. And then I write for, 10, 15 minutes every single morning. And, some of my community members end up getting that writing as well. But it's a process that has really, really helped me and helps me set the day every single morning.
So let me bring my co-hosts in here. First of all, welcome to Anne-Marie, who was able to make it. We weren't sure when you were going to be able to get in here, but thank you. Good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Apologies for being late, and I'm going to have to go and watch rewatch the show because I really want to know what happened at the beginning, Branden.
Yeah. you missed quite a story. You came in right at the end of it. Yeah, you'll definitely want to hear that one. But, but we're glad you could make it anyway. And Louis, I want to go to you first on this because obviously you did hear the whole story. And as usual, I imagine you have some sort of commentary going on here. What are you thinking about?
Branden, you say you're looking at philosophy at the moment. How does your philosophy before and after the experience changed? And what are you leaning towards at the moment?
So I didn't have a philosophy before, right? And I think that's
so if I asked you beforehand why you're alive, you would say, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it.
I was too focused on me. I was very focused on just validating myself through success, right? I was a very success-oriented individual. I thought that was what was important in life. And so for me, it was, I was always, I guess you would say, introspective to some sense, but I never actually did anything about it, right? It was more conversation. And I think the switch in my philosophy was taking, building a sense of core values, which is not something that I ever really had, right? I was just doing things because I thought that was how you got to a certain place. And I believe
which is why you fell apart.
Exactly. You nailed it. And I believe that lack of having a sense of core values is what, like you said, is what allowed me to make decisions that ended up putting me in a very bad situation, right? And so the difference is, I realized that having those core, a core sense of values, those core operating principles, that was a huge shift in my mindset. And so, I now, like I said, I live deeply in the service of others. I focus on having a very disciplined life. I'm a very big fan of having mentors. And so those are some things that sound simple and maybe a little bit obvious, but I did not practice any of those things at that point, right? Before my journey. So.
Your mentors are curious, because I've had a few in my lifetime. Have you ever outgrown any of them?
Yes. Absolutely. I think you need different mentors for different things. And one of the rules I have is, like, I don't, and this might sound judgmental, but it is what it is. Like, I won't take advice from anybody who is not where I want to be, right? Or above. And that might be in my fitness. It might be in my mindset. It might be in my professional life, my financial life, right? Each of them because it's very rare that you find a human being who is complete in every single one of those areas, right? And so I look for mentors based on, those different categories, as well as the season of life that I happen to be in, right? I'm now in what we'll call it my rebuilding season. And so I have a different mentor today than I did at the point where my life had just crumbled and fallen apart, right? I needed different guidance at that point.
What's the next season after the rebuilding one?
Giving back.
And in giving back, you end up being a mentor yourself, don't you?
That's correct. Build the man, a complete man, and then give that man to the world, right? That is my ultimate goal. And that's what I'm working on every single day. And that's where the structure and discipline come from.
Have you ever come across Jordan Peterson on the internet?
Oh, of course. How could you not? Yeah.
Because I see similarities, because, he's just had his license attacked by the board. And he went and fought for it. And now they've said to him he has to be reformed, and they have to re-educate him. And of course, he refused all that point blank. And now he's suing them.
Yeah,
which is really, really interesting. So, he's also somebody who believes in conflict.
Yeah,
says conflict helps clarity, and so the people who are more in that arena are likely to get cheaper deals. They're likely to get further in life in many respects, which is really interesting, because you don't often hear people talking about that aspect of life.
Yeah, you certainly can't be afraid of conflict, because conflict will come to you whether you want it or not, right? That's just life. And I think that, I'm someone who's experienced this personally. Like, I was a weak individual, and I'd be the first person to say it. And I was not prepared for this situation. Now, I believe that, every failure or struggle provides the opportunity for an even greater rebirth, if you will, but that's not a guarantee, right? It's not like, okay, I failed, I'm definitely going to succeed again. No, I know a lot of people who have experienced the exact same thing that I've gone through. Unfortunately, it's a community that I now know, and I know several people who've been through it. Most of them, probably 2/3, and maybe I'm being generous, they just fade away and they never get back up again. And so I have committed to putting my story out there. I hope you guys understand, it's a very uncomfortable story. It's an embarrassing story.
Absolutely.
It's a hard thing to talk about every time. And I tell this story 3 or 4 times a week. But the only way, I believe, for me to help and give back and to serve others is to share my most vulnerable, most embarrassing moments, because it's my genuine hope that people can relate to that and find some value in it.
It is one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, because obviously you went to jail, you experienced what you experienced, and you came out stronger. What percentage of people who go into incarceration come out with a more positive attitude?
I don't think that many. I went in, of course, like I had said, I went in very excited to try to help and to try to make a positive impact. But in my community of about 65 men, there were maybe a handful of guys that really were genuinely invested in building like a future for themselves. And so I would host all these workshops, as I said, and I would provide office hours. And in those office hours, I would sit in the middle of the whole big room at a table, and I had like a resume writing books and like draft copies of resumes and release plans. I would help guys write release plans, so like what they would do for the next 12 months after they were released, to try to help get them set up. I mean, I would sit there sometimes for hours, and there was a sign, like you could see, I would sit there for hours by myself. And every now and then somebody would come over. It was almost like in that community, they were embarrassed to try to like improve themselves, which I thought was a little strange. But there were maybe a handful who were like deeply, deeply invested, and they would tell me, and they would pull me aside and say, look, I want to be better. I want to serve my family. I want to be a good man, but I don't know how. I grew up in a family of my grandmother taught me how to deal drugs. Like this is the only thing that I know. Like this is the environment some people are growing up in. It's very challenging for them to break out of it. I didn't grow up in that environment. And so I would
great benefit to the street cred though.
Absolutely. Many of these people, many of the people that I was incarcerated with, like they would make fantastic entrepreneurs. And I explained this to them over and over again. Like, if you can sell and market, which clearly you can do that, that's why you're here.
White collar crime, quite good stuff. Huh?
Yeah. Well, if you were to focus that energy on something positive that brought value to, your fellow man in society instead of something destructive, you could serve your family and live a very wonderful life if you committed to that. And that was really the message that I was trying to share. And I brought some of kind of the business acumen and some of the financial acumen and tried to teach some of that as well, so they would have some substance to it.
Looking at the bigger philosophy of incarceration, jail, or whatever you want to call it,
Sure.
Would you say that the system is very badly designed?
It depends on what your intent was.
Ooh, good answer.
So I think based on the way you asked that question, I'm assuming you would prefer if there were better outcomes, just like I would, then yes, it was badly designed, but it was not designed to create good outcomes, right? It was designed to be punitive. And
but looking at the bigger philosophy of punitive structure, if you understand the law of attraction, when you focus on what you want, you're going to get more of it. When you focus on what you don't want, you're going to get more of it. So, the criminal system is really, some people, as far as I understand, but you may be able to correct me, but, because they're so used to jail, they will go and commit a crime and get back in it the next day so that they've got somewhere to stay and feel safe again. So I don't know if there's a level of truth to that, but I have heard that is the case.
Do you want to hear something? I'll get to that, but it reminded me of an emotion that I felt right before I came home. I was afraid to leave.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird, right? I was only, by the way, I only served 10.5 months on 37. So I did, like, they call that a baby bid, right? That doesn't even count for most guys. And so, but even in that period of time, it's amazing how your mind adjusts. And I felt guilty. I felt like I was leaving, these guys behind, and I felt like they needed, not that they needed me, but I believed that I was providing value. And so it was a very, very strange emotion, having to leave there. And so anyway, yeah, it was odd. It was a really, really odd feeling.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever spent any time thinking about what a better system would be?
It's tough because, like you said, a lot of those guys, they leave and they want to come right back. But I think it's because...
But isn't it because the system is not designed? The punitive system is not...
Well, in some cases, their lives are much better in prison. Prison's
exactly.
Easy, right? Exactly. Prison, you don't worry about anything. You
Safe,
don't have to feeding
protected,
yourself.
Food, yeah.
That's it. You don't. I mean, you can have jobs, but it's easy. It's hard in some ways, mentally and emotionally, it's difficult. But like, as far as, having to earn your keep and make money and be productive, it's easy. And so a lot of them, they just like, how do you solve that problem? That's a systemic, societal mental health.
Exactly. It's a very big picture.
Educational issue. It's a structural problem. And then they end up in that system that is just this revolving door. And so it's, how do I envision a better system? And man, if I could answer that question, I probably would be I'd be talking to the White House here right now. But
absolutely, yeah, no, that's the kind of level we need to go to move things in it. Yeah.
There are a lot of very, very intelligent, driven people who are trying to solve this problem. One way that somebody put it, actually it was Michael, I believe, who said it's like, the prison system is like trying to, turn a giant container ship. Right? Like you can turn it, and there's like a lot of things that have been put in place, like the First Step Act, for example, but it's going to take years for that to actually like flow through the system. Right. And like that law was passed, I believe it was signed in 2020. And like only recently, like 2.5 years later, did that law actually take effect. So like in 2022-ish is when you really started to see things begin to happen.
Sorry, what was this law?
The First Step Act.
So I don't know what that is.
Our friends here are British, so they don't know the American system.
Okay, and so the First Step Act was a law that essentially would allow inmates, federal inmates, to get credit for going through educational programs while they were incarcerated. Okay, and so that credit would slowly reduce the amount of time that they had to do. And so that was signed by Donald Trump in 2020. It was bipartisan, and it eventually worked its way into the Bureau of Prisons, which is actually like its own bureaucratic organization. And if you think about it, these organizations are run by people who've been doing this for 20, 30 years, right? Their whole career. It's been done a certain way. Now some law comes into play and they have to switch all of this. Well, no, right? It's going to take time to work through the system. And there are a lot of very intelligent people, very motivated people, many of them formerly incarcerated, who are working on very important prison reform work right now. So I believe we are going to see it, but it's going to take a long time.
Well, one thing that society, I believe, does completely wrong in its thinking is it very rarely believes that somebody can change. And without that belief, the whole system falls apart. And I think it's often because a lot of people don't see much change in their own lives, or they don't see themselves able to change. But that belief is very deeply driven inside us.
I think that's fair, but do you believe, my counter argument would be, do you believe that there is some validity to that?
Definitely.
If we take the sample of, like, say, the folks who've been incarcerated, like I said, I mean, I went in very optimistic, but I came out jaded, right? Because you realize that maybe 5 or 10% of people actually want to change their lives. Right?
But then not giving,
not great.
Not giving people that chance, or because our thoughts or our expectations are going to affect those around us. And it's really, if everybody on the planet thought that we could change, I think it would be very easy for the whole system to change. But until that level of positivity or change comes in the individuals, it's not going to change very quickly or easily as it is at the moment.
Yeah, whether people can change is not a question. People can absolutely change at any point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right? It's whether they have in some cases, and I go back and forth with clients about this, and what I will say to them is, as painful as your life is, you haven't actually experienced enough pain to change. And that pain tolerance, maybe that tolerance isn't the right word, but their adjustment to a certain level of pain, like, that gets pretty significant. You would think that the person who was doing their third time incarcerated, living a very, very difficult life, having family members get shot, like from gang violence or drug violence, you would think that would be enough pain. But there are
too jaded in that environment. Yeah,
exactly, right. Or to the point where they believe that change is impossible because they've grown up in an environment where they've seen the same thing. And I try to share that look, every single one of you can change your life, and like really hammer that into people's heads, because I was doing it myself. Right, I was living it, and I believe that living in congruency with your words is very, very important. And so I would show them every single day. I would stick to my structure. I would read. I would give back. I would exercise. Right, I would work right to my wife every day. Right, like building those family kind of core values, and I would show them all of this, and hoping that some of it would they would find benefit in it, and some of them did, but generally I would say a lot of them ignored it, or just kind of wrote me off as like this, this guy who's not from their part of the world, right? We're not from the same, same communities. And that was unfortunate, because I really tried to build relationships with people from all walks of life.
So, Walt, do you want to say something?
No, well, go ahead. I mean, you're on a roll. I don't want to interrupt that, but I'm ready. When you're ready to put the gavel down, let me know. We'll just kind of take it.
So Branden, what I love about you is I can see from your energy that you are focused. You do the exercise. You're not just talking about it. And I love that, because you've got now that built-in discipline, which a lot of people are missing. To really get that energy going, to do the exercise, to do the part that is necessary. And you also seem to be very aware of the activity and really living and walking the talk now is so important. And I really love that. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. I was the person, and this is a hard thing to say, but like, I was the person who believed in my head, and I would say all these things. I am this person. I am this good man. I am a law-abiding citizen. I am a trustworthy. I am a transparent person. But I realized that at some point my actions did not align with that belief system. And what I do every single day is I audit myself every morning, and I say, look, what did I do yesterday that I regret? What did I miss? Did I miss something in my character yesterday? And I will try to refocus my energy that day on making sure that there's no gap there, right? And that I never did that in my life. That would have sounded crazy to me 4 years ago.
Yeah. So what you're doing is you're understanding what you don't want in your life,
Yes.
in your abilities, in your character, and you're saying, okay, let me take my mind and think about what I do want that comes out of what I don't want.
Yes. Exactly.
And then, because you're spending clear time on what you do want, the universal law of attraction is going to bring into your life that.
Oh my God. My life is crazy. I have a beautiful life. I mean, and if you
feel that,
if I think about where I was at that moment, that phone call moment, and where I went, the journey that I went through, and where I am today, I am so blessed and grateful. I'm in a beautiful new home here. I live in South Florida, which is essentially just paradise. We do get some hurricanes, but don't let the details get in the way of a good story. I'm about to have my first child. I mean, I'm now working with a number of clients. We're working on some very cool business stuff. I'm engaged with a community and a mission that I deeply believe in. That life never existed before, even though I was far wealthier, but I could not care less about that, really. That life didn't exist.
You see, Branden, if you get that call again now, you'll say, yeah, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah, that's a fact. And that is what I'm really chuffed about with you. I can see that if you get that call again, it's not going to hit you.
No.
Which, by the way, is why you won't get the call again. I'm just saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you won't get that call again.
It also strikes me too. You guys were talking a moment ago about how change. What's it going to take for people to change? What's it going to take for the system to change, and so forth? And the thought that just kept resonating through my head over and over and over again while you were saying that was, it already is. One person at a time. Doesn't mean everybody in there in that circle are ready for it. Like you said, Branden, probably a small handful are ready for it, but the ones who are ready for it are ready for it.
Yep.
The example is there. The stories are there that they need to hear. the information that they need is being made available to them. The change is happening right now. It may not be happening across the board, widespread, with this huge wave of change going on, but it doesn't need to. All it needs is to have little bits of change happening, because as those little bits of change happen, they develop their own momentum. The momentum carries itself, just because you're being true to the change that you made in your own life and the change that you're encouraging others to make in their lives. So the change is happening. Just got to give it a little time.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to like definitiveness of purpose, right? And you know, something we were talking about earlier, just because maybe I'm answering my own, when you'd ask me that question about, you know, societal change and should we, you know, focus on it because most people don't believe change is possible. We should not try because the majority don't want to change. Like you just said, Walt, there are a few who will change and who will make a significant impact because they will act definitively. And that is really like what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to make an impact. I am just one person, but that's okay. And if I positively impact one other individual in my life, well, that other individual may go off and may positively impact another and then another, right? So we have this, it's really like a ripple effect in a sense. And I believe all of our thoughts and our actions ultimately do have that ripple effect, both negative and positive. And so, yeah, I really resonate with what you guys are saying here.
The way I learned that the universal law of attraction works, Branden, which is really interesting when I got clarity on it, is that once I've changed myself fully, then other people who need the change or from me or will be drawn towards me, those people that I can help. I don't have to go do it. I don't have to try and change them. I don't have to do anything. I just have to make sure that I keep my core center and my values and my clarity right, and then it'll help all those around me. And you know, the idea at the moment is I don't have any desire to change anybody. I just have the desire to keep my focus going, keep my clarity going, and move forward. And then the appropriate people will be drawn to me.
Yeah, that's it. And so I work every day to be this, to be the white collar savage, right? Which is a, you know, purpose driven, mission driven individual. And I simply focus, like I had said, I focus on my daily practice, and then I share that with the world. That's it. And if that
share your
draws
passion,
people, yeah, if that draws people, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, well, I'm going to do the same thing anyway.
Exactly. That's not going to make any difference in your life. Yeah.
Correct. And so, like, people ask me all the time, well, what would happen if you were, you know, wildly successful again? Like, you know, what would you do? I would do the exact same thing. And then people often ask me, well, you know, how would you react if you went back to prison? I would do the exact same thing. It's a process that I have that works for me. And I know it worked for me in my darkest moment. And it was a process that didn't exist even when I was outwardly successful. This process has kept me consistent, and it has kept me on a path that has led me to live this incredible life in a very, very short period of time after leaving, you know, prison, I should add, right? Like a lot of people.
How long ago was the prison experience?
So I was technically released from prison in June of 2021, but you know, it's a phased process, right? So I was not officially released from the Bureau of Prisons until I believe January of 2022. So, you know, we're working on call it 18 months or so. I was on home confinement for a little bit of that before that, but you know, so yeah, so it's still a very short period of time, but the entire time I was going through this process, I've been planning it, and I've been simply trying to align my actions with that plan.
Looking at the reasons you were incarcerated. Yeah. Do you, looking back, do you think that the law, the way it's structured, did you justice? It did what it should do?
I think the law is not necessarily designed to provide justice on a situational basis. It is designed to provide justice on the aggregate. And so it doesn't necessarily see color, right? It just lumps everybody.
It doesn't see it.
It just
and
exactly
is shades of gray. Yeah.
It just lumps everybody in. And in the business community, in the white collar community, laws are very, very gray, and I don't want to mollify. But what I will say is that, you know, this whole situation, if I look back, and I say this in front of my wife and she gets a little mad, but like, it was the greatest thing that has ever happened to me.
Absolutely.
And then she's the next thing, but I say it in that order because it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe that had I not worked as hard as I have to become and to maintain the man that I have become, I probably would not have that marriage today. And we have a wonderful, beautiful marriage, even through all of this. Mm-hmm. And so it really
Which is amazing.
Again, we're going back to justice, but what does that really mean? I mean, if it's you're speaking about for me personally, I would probably be an alcoholic drinking myself to death right now, probably not have the wife. I probably would have squandered my wealth anyway, so that probably would have been gone, right? Like, so to me, it was one of the best things that's ever happened. So it was something, unfortunately, I believe needed to happen to me. Just or unjust, I don't know.
It's interesting how often that comes out in these conversations. You know, it's an experience, no matter what the experience is. It's an experience that the person telling the story never wants to go through again, but they value it more than anything else. Amazing how often that happens. Yeah. And Marie, I think you've got a pretty good handle on what's going on here now, even though you missed the story at the beginning part. So what are you thinking about at this point?
I'm loving it. It's so interesting. And I love the fact that, you know, it's the whole mindset change, and it was about your experience and you changing your mindset around it and what you do daily, because it isn't just I had this experience, I'm fixed, I know what I need to do. It is ongoing development work. And I do the same thing every morning. What am I grateful for? What do I want to achieve when I go to bed? What am I grateful for? What do I want to change? What would I change? And journaling. Yeah, my journal's right here. So yeah, I love hearing that it's just constant work and we all have to work on ourselves.
One of the most impactful things that somebody said to me about gratitude was the highest form of gratitude is action. And that really resonated with me because I do, of course, I kind of sit and I take a personal inventory, like I think you were saying, and that's a valuable exercise. But then I try to take it a step further and I go, okay, it's one thing to think about things that I feel blessed about. It's another thing to go out every single day and earn those things, to show my wife that I value her, not just write it on a piece of paper, to, you know, prove to myself that I am a good person through action, right? Through deliberate action, to give back and serve the world and not just talk about it on a podcast, to actually go out and do it every single day. That is how I show gratitude, right? And I never would have made that connection had I not gone through this experience.
That's brilliant.
It's humbling too.
That hit me really hard. That's something I like. I think about that every day, right? How am I going to show the people that I love and that I truly value? How am I going to show them that I'm grateful? Not just tell them.
Because ultimately, you're showing yourself.
Yeah, it's a fact. Exactly.
And in the process, that's where you gain self-confidence, self-love, self-respect. It's also where you gain, like you were describing before, your sense of what your purpose is in life, at least as you define it right now. I mean, basically, it becomes the source of everything that's going on in your world. Yeah.
And, you know, consistency breeds confidence, right? So the more and more you do it, the more confident you feel in it. And the more confident you feel in it, the more action you take, right? So it just becomes this spiral. But the hardest part for so many people is getting that ball rolling, right? It's like trying to move a giant boulder, right? At first, it's extremely difficult. But once the momentum builds, like, I can't imagine my life going another way. People are always like, well, don't you ever like take a day off? And I'm like, what do you mean? What is that? Take a day off from like being myself? Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know how to do that at this point.
If you're enjoying your life and what you're doing and where you're going, you don't.
Exactly.
You don't need to take it.
Why would I want to do that? That sounds stupid.
I don't know if you bumped into Sadhguru, but he like sleeps about 4 hours a night and works like 16 hours a day and so 365 days a year. You know,
he's the 3 a.m. guy, right? he's like a big fan of this the energy.
He does
source.
talk about it, but I think all the yogis speak about the 3 a.m. kind of concept.
So I get up
3:20 or 3:30 or whatever it is.
Exactly. I think it is 3:20. Yeah. I get up really early, but I don't know. I never said that. I never thought I'd be able to get up at 4:30, and I do every day. So I probably could do it if I wanted to. I just I'm not that level yet. I'm still growing.
Getting there. Yeah. That's exciting. It's exciting. It's always exciting growing more and more. I wanted to ask you one other question about the savage. Can you?
Sure.
Yeah, just going to the savage side a little bit.
What would you like me to tell you about it?
Anything? Why did you use the word savage?
So it really comes down to like a relentlessness, right? A pure savagery, right? That there's a like a monster inside of you, and that monster, if you focus that energy, and the way that I like to describe focusing that energy is, it's thermodynamics, I think, in a sense, right? And our thoughts are energy. That's just like physics. And so if we can take the energy from the negative experiences in our life and focus that energy towards something positive, like, for example, for me, it was fitness, because it was fitness and serving others. Like, those were the two things in my darkest moments that I refocused that energy. And so for me, that negative energy and the intensity with which I felt that, to redirect that in we'll call it a savage way towards, getting extremely fit, quitting drinking alcohol, serving other people, and just doing it in this like consistent, like relentless manner. That is really what Savage is designed to embody. And so, yeah. And the fitness piece has really been like a big thing for me. Like I said, I've probably said it 5 times by now, but it completely saved my life. And so every week I put myself through a pretty strenuous physical exercise as my reward for having a good week. So on Sundays,
I love that.
Exactly.
Everybody did the exercise thinking about reward.
It's all about framing. So I do this every Sunday morning, and I do it live on Instagram. I do this kind of crazy workout, and that's supposed to be my day off. And so instead of taking a day off, I work out every day, and I go and Sunday morning, 6 a.m. on Instagram Live, I do this crazy workout. It's a 1 mile. It's called the Murph. It's like a CrossFit style workout. It's named after a Navy SEAL, and it's a 1 mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and a 1 mile run.
100 pull-ups. Oh my God!
With a 20-pound weight vest on, and so it is that is like the pure example of savage.
You do it all in one go?
No, I can't do them all at once.
No,
that
as
would
long
be
as there's reps, I'm happy.
Yeah. No, if you got to do them one at a time, you do them one at a time. But as long as you can get 100 of them done, yeah, it's intense.
100 one at a time. That's still hectic. My God.
It would take a while, but you get out there and you just do it. There is no failure. You just keep going.
Wow. I mean, I remember in the army we did pull-ups. Probably the last time I ever did pull-ups.
Well, then that's my dare to you, is go out and do some pull-ups today.
Okay, I'll take you on. Why not?
We're running low on time here. There is one other question I want to bring in here, because you made reference to the facing of that place where so many people don't feel like they can take that first step. It's just too overwhelming. It's too imposing. Whether it be they may not be in prison, they could be dealing with other kinds of prison, if you will. They could be dealing with a massive drug situation. They could be dealing with abuse at home. They could be dealing with loss of employment, homelessness. They could be dealing with a whole bunch of possible things, but they all come down to the same thing. What do you do? How do you get started? For someone who's in that place where they need to somehow find a way and a reason to get started, what do you tell them?
So people are either motivated by one of two things. It's either the avoidance of pain, that's me, or the pursuit of pleasure.
Carrot or stick.
What's that?
Carrot or stick.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. So you have to identify what that is for you. And you have to be very honest with yourself. It's not necessarily like a right or a wrong thing. It's about being self-aware. And I know that there's no amount of reward or money or whatever that's going to make me do something. But if I think about what it would feel like to let my wife down, somebody who has stood by me through everything, I'm saying it now and I'm getting emotional just saying that. That thing that you feel in your chest, that's the thing. Don't ignore that thing, because that thing is what is pulling you. That's your conscience guiding you. And so for some people who are having a hard time identifying that, you got to just lock yourself in a dark room and just like really like get in there and be alone.
Well, you need to go to prison.
No, you don't have to do that. I do not advocate that. You can discover this on your own. But success, might mean different things for different people, right? And it's a progression. So if you have somebody who's like really, truly struggling, it might mean getting out of bed that day. And that's it. That's your win for the day. But then after a period of time, it's like, okay, I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to go for a walk. Okay, well, now I'm going to get out of bed. I might read a little, and then I'm going to go for a walk. I might read, I might get out of bed, I might go for a walk, I might send a gratitude text message to somebody that's really made a positive impact in my life. You see the progression? It's slowly adding to your development. And that's really what I have done over a period of years. It's been years. It takes years, and I do it every single day. So that would be my suggestion for someone, is just take that initial step, identify if it is the carrot or if it is the stick for you, and really build that mental framework. And so if I feel like I'm going to quit, and if I do this in my workouts, by the way, if I feel like I'm like, you know what, nobody's counting but me, I can just kind of walk out right now and nobody will ever know. I immediately go, but I'll let my wife down. I will. If I let my wife down, that's like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And I don't care if I'm going to die. I will finish those push-ups, right? Like that's how I do it. And so you have to find out what that is for you. Nobody can tell you what that is. You have to discover that for yourself.
I think it's fair to say too that you don't need to have concrete walls in order to be in a prison.
That's a fact. People live in far worse prisons than any prison I've ever been in, and it's all in their own mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep.
This has been both a chilling and a renewing experience hearing your story, and thank you for sharing it, Branden. Before we go, we need to get some information from you. First of all, how does somebody reach out to you, especially if they're in that dark place and they need that mentor who's been there before? Like you said, you've been there. You know the way out.
I have been there, yeah, and exactly. So I post a lot of content on my Instagram. It's at White Collar Savage, and I respond to everyone who reaches out always. So if anybody is in that place, I would be more than happy to help. And
you also have a coaching program, I believe. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have really two sides of it. I have a business coaching program where I work with high-level entrepreneurs and business owners kind of executing what we'll call the private equity playbook. That's really the deployment of my my core skill set, my business skill set. But really the other side of what I do is I have essentially like a elite kind of mindset coaching program where I work with individuals on a group basis. And we work on all things personal development, and I give them the playbook for what I have done to completely reform my life. And it's extremely rewarding, and it's core of it is fitness, nutrition, as well as all the personal development tricks and tips that I have deployed in my life that have really helped me overcome really one of the darkest things that I think some people can go through. So it's very rewarding, very enjoyable work.
Well, I'm sure that we all appreciate what you've been sharing with us about what you enjoy about it, as well as the trials and tribulations of it. Everybody who appears on this program does so out of a sincere desire to share with others about what they've learned, and you clearly have been doing that yourself. One thing that I have realized over the last year or so that doesn't happen enough is that with all you mentioned content, people put out content all the time trying to help other people, and it often gets consumed by people they never hear from, they never see, they don't know who they are, they don't know what results were, and so forth. And so we kind of let that slip under the cracks, so to speak. And I like to kind of bring that out into the open. So on behalf of those people you've never met and who you've never seen, who you've helped with your content, thank you for what you've been doing and what you're continuing to do, because you are making a difference in this world.
Yeah, thank you. And thank all of you for having me. It's been a really wonderful conversation. And thank you for what you guys are doing. I think the subject of and the focus of your podcast is really incredible. So thank you and good for you.
Appreciate that. Anne-Marie, I want to go to you for the last comment. What's the one takeaway? We always look for that one takeaway, that one thing that stands out above all the others. For you, what is it?
Just wow. That's pretty much. Tenacity. I just got that tenacity, that drive, and just to be your best self.
Good summary. I love it. So Branden Coluccio, thank you so much for joining us. Louis and Anne-Marie, thank you so much as well. And thank you especially to all of our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.